Welcome everyone. The most important question, probably the most common question I get is, what have you been reading lately? Is there something I should be reading? Any good books on taxes? Any good books on money? Any good books on how to live life better? And the answer is almost always yes. But there's a couple things to keep in mind. Before I go into my list of books that I've been reading since last summer, this few months ago, and the ones that are worthy of being recommended, I'd like to talk about a few things about books before we get started. So, let's talk about Bill Gates. Bill Gates is a voracious reader, and if you've read Gates' notes, you would see that he has this wide range of topics that he likes to cover. But Bill Gates does something very interesting, and it's going to get to another topic with the next person we talk about in a second, and that is Bill Gates, when he reads, will read this wide variety. So he might be reading the Russian novels, then he's reading on some kind of scientific discovery, then he's reading a novel, then he's reading some different piece of material. But when he's on a project and he wants to solve a problem, what he does is he has a think week, and what he does is he gets all these books that he can possibly find on the subject, takes them into this little cabin out in the backwoods, not by my backwoods, but in the backwoods, and what he'll do is then he'll spend this whole week just immersed in all these books and study nonstop. When that week is over, he has a pretty good education on that topic. Elon Musk is the other individual I'd like to talk about because recently he was asked what his success was involved with, or how did he become successful? And he said, I read books, and it sounds pretty interesting because we all know that Elon Musk is a good reader too. Most people that are successful are. But what most people don't realize is that what Elon Musk has done is technology that's been around for a very long time. He's just applying it in unique ways and maybe expanding upon the technology. The other thing that's unique about Mr. Musk is that he is not a rocket scientist. He never went to college for it, never was trained for it. He just read books on it. And he's doing things that even NASA couldn't do 5 or 10 years ago. Now he's sending rockets into space, and the rockets land by themselves. This is a new technology using old technologies as the foundation. And that is why books are so important to read. Why do I have the experience and the success that I have in my business? Well, it's not because I have 15 years of college. It's because when I did take some college, what I did actually do is learn how to learn, and then I went out there and keep on learning as I go through life. So I keep on gaining experience, I keep on getting knowledge. And why is that important? Well, if you go to college, you're just reading the book, the professor's going to lecture on that book, and then you get tested to see if you know what you're doing. You can short-circuit the whole thing and watch lectures online, watch guys like me, watch college professors through the teaching company or on YouTube videos or other training videos, and you can read the very same books. I buy college textbooks probably several a year, and they're kind of expensive, but I get the same college education as someone would in business school. So let's get to the book selections that I have for you for this coming up winter. So have your handy dandy highlighter in place. This last couple of months I was a little bit lazy. I didn't read all just money books and educational books and learning books. I got myself some fun reading. So we're going to start out with a doorstop, and I have a couple doorstops for you this time. I got the complete works, over 2,500 pages I believe, all the works of Raymond Chandler. He is dead now, but he is a writer that was in the crime detective type story, if you're not familiar with him, and it is what's called noir. And I love noir stories, and it's a little dystopian, and I really love dystopian noir stories. So Raymond Chandler. So if you like the private detective type story from the 1930s, 1940s, this is the kind of thing that the hard-boiled detective story that if you like to read, you'll enjoy this. And I went through this pretty quick. And by the way, all these are going to be available in the links below through Amazon if you wish to purchase these. Some of these you can probably just get through the library. I tend to purchase my books, but I do get a lot of library books. This one you probably can just get from the library if it's available. The second book I want to introduce you to, and this one I find very interesting. Again, I've had a little bit of a novel run here, and I don't read many novels anymore, but I read a lot of novels this late summer, early fall. And this one I bought, put on my shelf. This one here is by Philip Roth. It's called The Plot Against America. It's about Charles Lindbergh becoming president in 1940, but Lindbergh was a noted anti-Semite, and it's from the perspective of a Jewish family, and it is quite telling. And believe it or not, this was written about 15 years or so ago, and it is very telling compared to our society today and some of the things we're dealing with. So I think you're going to enjoy it because there's some similarities. The good news is I'll let you into a little piece of the plot, Lindbergh looks like he's a really bad character, and I was always wondering how his family would think about a book like this, especially since it won some prizes. Lindbergh, Semite, he was at the time. What he does in this book, obviously not true because he's never president, but what he does in this book is truly honorable. So I think it was a great story and certainly worth reading, and certainly will give you some ideas about our world today compared to times in the past. So it's not always better in the past, and that's not always worse today. Keep in mind this you can also get from your library as well. It's a book that you probably don't put any highlighters in it. This one was recommended to me so many times I had to do it. It's called Atomic Habits by James Clear. This one I do recommend that you keep, and there's a reason why I recommend that. You're going to go back to it again and again, and you're going to highlight it. So you're going to, if you turn my pages here, you're going to see if there's a close-up on any of this, I can probably go like this on you guys, and you'll see all my nice yellow highlights. Well, the reason why that's important to highlight and do these habits is because success, I have learned a long time ago, is a product of the habits that you have. And one of the biggest problems that I have that I was hoping this book would solve, and in part did, and that is with procrastination. And here's how procrastination works for me. It gets to be tax season. I've been putting in a lot of hours. I'm very tired, and that tax return, I just can't get off my desk because every time I start it, it gets stopped. Every time I try to start it, there's missing paperwork. Finally, everything comes in. It's ready to get done. Maybe it's a complex issue, whatever it is, but it gets to the side of my desk. And once it gets to the side of my desk, it's in this, no man's land where I never get to it because I just can't mentally get past that barrier. The other problem with it is that I think it's going to take a long time. But when I actually get it done, usually because a client's mad and I finally say I got to get it off my desk, it doesn't take nearly as long as I expected. James Clear has for his Atomic Habits is he has a rule that says just do something for 2 minutes. And if it doesn't work, go do something else. But once you get started, it's not bad. I find that about 80 to 90% of the time, 85% of the time, if I just say I'm just going to open that darn file and play with it for 2 minutes, just look at the name, look at some stuff, and it doesn't have to be a tax return, it can be any project whatsoever. Maybe doing these videos. If I just start doing the video, it's unlikely I'm going to stop in 2 minutes. I usually start getting ahead of steam. I may not be able to complete the project, but I usually make some good progress with that project, and that's important. So James Clear, I recommend buying this one and keeping it on your bookshelf, probably close at hand. You don't want it in a back room because you're going to go through this again and again. Lots of ways of building habits, and it's a compilation. It just kind of builds on the habits, so you keep on having this that you can have in your own personal, professional, health, spiritual life. It all is good habits that do that. This one I might have read a little bit earlier in the summer. It's called The Great Influenza. It's a book that was written again several years ago, before the current pandemic, and it talks about the 1918 influenza thing. I highlighted the book up pretty good because I thought it was very interesting. There is some science in it. It's really the history of it. The thing that really got me with this book is how much technology already existed in 1918 for things like vaccines and things of that nature. And things that we're hearing today in the news are not that different than what the doctors were talking about 100 years ago. I find that very fascinating. If you're interested in this type of thing and the history of where it came from, then you'll be interested in this as well. You'll also be interested that some of the things that they were looking at using are very similar to what we're using for the pandemic today. It's almost like it's ripped from today's pages when you're reading 1918 and 1919 newspaper reports and the story in here. A fun read, certainly worth doing, in my opinion. The next one is another one of my doorstops. This is the Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky. He writes pretty good, lengthy books. When I say doorstops, I mean doorstops. I did do a little bit of highlighting. I think you can get this from pretty much any library. It is a long read. I do recommend it because it is a great story. Dostoevsky is really good at these psychological things. So Crime and Punishment, for example, is a story about a guy that committed the perfect murder and got away with it, and his conscience literally drove him mad till he confessed. And it was quite a good story. This is a story about a man that is eventually convicted of parricide, which is killing of your father. And he's innocent, actually, in this situation, and it tells a good long story how it gets there. Certainly interesting. Also deals with issues of religion and faith, because this was written about 150 or so years ago. very interesting in so many levels that I could talk about this book and the plot probably for 20 hours, and it's just so deep. I actually went to my library and got the Yul Brynner version of the movie, which also happens to have William Shatner in it as the monk. And the funny part about that is he didn't look like Captain Kirk. He was very young. The movie did not do it justice. They couldn't cover this book decently. They missed some things. They moved some things around to have any kind of plot line at all. So much going on in here. It's certainly a good read, especially if you have a week of life to put into it, because it's not a day read. It's something that's going to take a period of time. A lot, 800-900 pages is probably 400, 300, 400,000 words. So, but certainly gripping. You can't put it down. So it'll ruin your sleep at night. Because I read Raymond Chandler, I also read The Maltese Falcon by Hammett. It's also one of these noir type detective novels. Short, easy read. Again, I bought it. I get a lot of these things where I sometimes get free credits on Amazon where I can buy things. If you do something, you get a gift card for $20 or something. When I do that, then I can buy books. That's kind of my book allowance, and and sometimes I spend money on it too. I don't go out to drink and things like that, so I got to have a vice, and this is it. This is a book, though, you can easily read pretty quickly and go to the library and get. It's a good story, and it's a little different than the Raymond Chandler R-type detective story. And I'll let you figure out what it's all about. But there's actually a movie on it as well. I went to the library and checked that out as well. Really, and it wasn't bad. I think the movie was actually pretty true to the story and pretty good. Reading the book was better, though, in most cases. What am I reading right now? This book is almost done, and this is a very good book. I highly recommend it. I'll be finishing it up in the next day or so. If I don't finish it tonight, it'll be finished tomorrow. The only reason for that is the election was last night as I'm filming this, and we don't know what the election results are exactly yet, so I'm involved in just kind of watching that and doing things in the office, but probably by tomorrow it'll be done. And it's called How Not to Be Wrong, The Power of Mathematical Thinking. Now, this is a really good book because it's not about being right, it's about not being wrong. And there's interesting takes in here. So, for example, there's a part of the book where they talk about a lottery. And the lottery is almost always a bad bet, but there was actually 2 lotteries in the last 20 years in the United States where they did bad math. And if you played it correctly and knew when to play it and knew how to play it, you actually could have a massive rate of return. And there are actually groups of people. Surprised one was from Harvard and another was a lawyer, and some doctors got together over in Michigan. And they really cleaned house on that product. And of course, then it kind of went away. But it certainly was a very profitable venue. It's not about playing the lottery correctly, but understanding the mathematics behind it. Understanding the math of how things work don't always give you the definitive answer of being right, but it certainly can help you from avoiding things that are absolutely empirically wrong. And that's an important distinction. Science is like that. Science doesn't prove things always right. It's a process where we're going to try to prove this wrong and prove this right, and then we take another step up, we take another step up. Well, this book tells you the mathematics behind a lot of that. This one is a slower read than these other books, mostly because you have to think about it. The math isn't always too deep, but there certainly is some math that the author does do for you. If you read it quickly, you just kind of miss the math part of it, but you understand the concept. I think it works, but not necessarily required to dig that deep. I'm a little more mathematically inclined, so I can't help myself, and I'm going through all the, some of the geometry and the trigonometry and that, and it's still good. It's a good book to read regardless. And before we leave, I already have my next book that I'm going to read, and this one is going to be a factual book, not a novel, and it's by Carl Sagan called The Demon Haunted World. And I asked some of my people on Facebook what they thought would be a good book to read, and I get ideas that way from people, as just whatever comes along in my life. I've heard about this one a couple times, and the subtitle is Science as a Candle in the Dark. And what they cover, what Sagan covers in here, because I kind of paged through it a little bit, is that it's going to cover the ideas of where science and mythology and, there's certain things in our world that people sometimes fall for certain hoaxes, and it allows you to understand the difference between hoaxes and truth. I know that would not be applicable in our world today. Carl Sagan didn't know what was happening, but just in case it did, it might be something worth reading, and that's why I'm going to read it. I think it's pretty good. Now, keep in mind, I'm going to have all these links to these books, and probably everyone that I mentioned as well in the description on this video. There will be links. Keep in mind that I do have an affiliate program with Amazon, so if you use that link, that there is compensation to me, and I think it's only fair to disclose that. If you have any ideas about books that are great to read that I haven't mentioned here, or you think would be great for me to read, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. It's pretty important because I have a long list, but I really do read pretty voraciously, and hopefully you enjoy a good book as well too, because there's nothing like a nice cold day in the winter and you get a cup of coffee or hot apple cider or some tea or some hot chocolate, and you just sit back and enjoy a good book.